Shout with joy to God all the earth.
Sing to the glory of his name.
Offer him glory and praise.
Sing to the glory of his
Sing
name.
to the
Sing to the
glory.
glory of his
Sing
name.
to the
Sing to the
glory.
glory of his name.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Devoratorium. My name is Darnay DeVore, and I'm going to be your host. On today's episode, Sodom and Gomorrah, Haughtiness and Entitlement. Today, we're going to take a journey into the mindset of the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah and how that mindset led to their ultimate downfall. Then, we're going to ask an important question. Are we adopting that same mindset today, right now, in our country or in our world? Will the corruption of our hearts open the door to our downfall? Let's start back in Genesis chapter 13, where we have Abraham, known at the time as Abram, and his nephew Lot. They are separating. Okay, they started out on a journey together, but their flocks, their herds, their servants that were tending to them, they just grew too large. And the path they were on could not sustain food-wise, water-wise, could not sustain both of their entourages. Okay, so they had to separate. Abraham decided they should separate so they can end the quarreling. No more fighting over this body of water or this tree for food for their animals or what have you. So Abraham told Lot, whichever direction you choose, I'll choose the opposite. You pick first. So Lot chose the area with the most vegetation. He chose the area that was the most green, that looked like it was fed by water the most, because he knew there would be the most food, the most supplies. All right. So he picked the area where Sodom and Gomorrah were located. No problem. It was well watered, like Egypt, the Bible says, and it was like the garden of the Lord. It was so beautiful. Abraham didn't mind because his faith was in God, and he knew he was already blessed and would continue to be so by God. However, before we leave this little scene in Genesis chapter 13, we have this ominous verse, Genesis 13, verse 13. Now the people of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. Okay, this gives us a glimpse into Sodom, the location where Lot will now be traveling. It's a beautiful place, but it's full of wickedness. Oftentimes, it's the beauty of a place or a person that attracts us to begin with. But what happens when we discover that the beauty was just bait? It was just bait to catch us on a hook, kind of like fishing. When you throw your line into the water, you've got the hook, but you've baited the hook with a bait that's going to appeal to whatever fish that are nearby. So the fish, they see the bait, it looks appealing, they go to eat it, and by the time they bite down on the bait, they realize that they've been impaled by a hook. Okay? By the time we realize we made a bad decision because we were lured in by bait, by the beauty, we're dangling from a hook and we're about to be devoured. That's when we realize we need to be rescued because we can't rescue ourselves. We can't lift ourselves off that hook, so to speak. We need someone from the outside to come in and help us in our dire need. Now, ironically, Lot needed to be rescued twice within the events of these chapters. Once, he was rescued during the siege of the 4 kings against the 5 kings, and the 5 kings, amongst those 5 kings, included the king of Sodom. You see all this in Genesis chapter 14. Now, how 4 kings and their kingdoms defeated the 5 kings and their kingdoms, that's a speculative thought that we're going to look at a little bit later. But Sodom, for now, Sodom lost. Sodom was amongst the kings, the kingdoms that lost this battle. Lot was captured and all of his stuff was stolen. Abraham receives word that his nephew Lot has been captured. So he gathers 318 of his own men, highly trained men, and he rescues Lot and gets all of Lot's stuff back. And in the process, he even rescues the 5 kings and their kingdoms who lost the battle to begin with. The king of Sodom, who's now been rescued by Abraham, he's so appreciative of Abraham for rescuing him and his people, he offers Abraham all their possessions. He just helped retrieve for them. Abraham tells him, no, No, Abraham accepts none of it. None of it. So they will never be able to say, we made Abraham rich. He's rich because of us. Remember, these were wicked people. We see that once again in Genesis 13:13. Abraham knows this. Abraham's fate and his fortunes are in the hands of God, and that was more than enough. He didn't need any stuff given to him from Sodom or any of the other kingdoms that he just rescued. So in Genesis 18:1 through 8, we see a beautiful scene. Okay, we're going to jump ahead a little bit. We see a beautiful scene of how Abraham treated three visitors. Okay, he sees three visitors and he immediately rushes towards them. He greets them. He offers them food, nourishment, housing. He offers them everything he can. He bends over backwards for their comfort. One was called Lord. Many theologians see this as pre-incarnate Jesus. This is Jesus amongst these three visitors. And when you read it, it does show that this is most likely Jesus. Okay? And he's with two angels. Now, after the three visitors finish eating, they finish visiting with Abraham, they get up to continue on their journey. They were already on their way someplace else. They weren't coming to visit Abraham. They just stopped off on the side on the way. But they were already on their way someplace else. We find out in the story, they're on their way to Sodom. This is what it says in Genesis 18:20 through 21. Then the Lord said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin is so grievous, that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know. All right? This is what's going on, but this is when compassionate Abraham attempts to make a deal. Abraham knows the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, all those surrounding places where his nephew Lot is. He knows they're wicked. He knows exactly who they are. He knows they're wicked. He just rescued them from the 5 kings in the previous chapter. So he knows how wicked they are. But he wants to make a deal. Why? Because his nephew Lot is down there with his family, with Lot's family. They're all down there. And he doesn't want it to see anything happen to them. So he tries to make a deal. Don't destroy the righteous with the wicked, Lord. If there are even 50 righteous people, will you spare Sodom? And the Lord says, yes, if there are 50 righteous people, I will spare Sodom. But Abraham keeps going. Okay. What about 45? If there are 45 righteous people, will you spare Sodom? And the Lord says, yes, I'll spare. If there are 45, I'll spare Sodom. Abraham kept bargaining all the way down till he got to 10. Do you think that Abraham knew there wasn't 50 to begin with? Yeah, or he just would have let him go. If they said, oh, we'll spare them. If there are 50 righteous people, I bet there are. You go now. No, Abraham kept bargaining down to the smallest number that he could, because he knew there wasn't even 50 righteous in the city of Sodom. That would be impossible for them to find. But he really wanted to spare his nephew. But now we get to Genesis 19. Genesis 19. Only 2 of the 3 visitors ventured into Sodom to see about the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah, as was mentioned earlier, as well as the potential of 10 righteous people. The Lord figure stayed behind. The 2 angels went on their own. Genesis 19:1 through 3 shows us how Lot hasn't met the strangers, but now he does. It shows us how Lot, like his uncle Abraham, treated the visitors with utmost reverence, food, nourishment, and anything they needed. He brought them under his roof. Both Abraham and Lot demonstrate a humility and an honorable intent toward strangers and visitors, but especially the ones that are obviously of a divine origin. But now the drama starts. Genesis chapter 19, verse 4 through 5. Before they had gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them. How does this passage show a contrast between how both Abraham and Lot treated the visitors versus how the men of the city are treating the visitors? Yes, some translations say, no, bring the men out so we can get to know them, rather than sex. But the Hebrew word yada can mean either one, get to know them, or have sex, depending on the context. Look at the context. Lot anxiously stops the visitors, Lot anxiously stops the visitors from spending the night in the city square. Okay? Why? They were going to spend the night in the city square, but Lot was like, no, don't. You come under my roof, under my protection. At this point in the passage, it's now bedtime. What happens after dark that they couldn't do during the daytime? I don't know. And they surround the house. The men of the city, young and old, they surround the house in order to meet them, to meet the visitors, to feed them, and offer them more provisions than Lot had already given them. Remember, this is a wicked city and sinning greatly against the Lord, according to Genesis 13:13. Abraham and Lot, they showed us a righteous greeting. This is how you greet visitors. This is how you treat strangers. This greeting, this one by the men of the city, this was something else. This was not righteous. Having or showing an attitude of superiority and contempt for people or things perceived to be inferior. You are inferior to us. This is haughtiness, okay? You are inferior to us. Therefore, we can do with you what we will, whether you like it or not, whether you enjoy it or not, or whether you even asked for it or not. We have desires, and you will meet our desires. What does entitled mean? What does it mean to be entitled? Having a right to certain benefits or privileges. It is our right to receive our pleasure and our validation from you. You will acknowledge us. We have decided that we deserve your flesh in any way we desire to take it. Is any of this humble? Is any of this hospitable? The men of the city had no desire to get to know the names of the visitors or to know the reason for their visit or to honor them in any way that would benefit the visitors. Being haughty and entitled is selfishness at its core, and it stands against the righteousness the visitors were sent to search for to begin with. Remember, they were going down there to see if there were 10 righteous people. So far, none. None outside of Lot and his immediate family. Now, here's the part that tells the tale, okay? This is the foundation of this entire video. Genesis 19:6-8 has Lot attempting to stop the men of the city, okay? Lot wants to stop them from breaking down his door, pulling the angels, the strangers out, and raping them. He tells them, don't do this wicked thing. And instead, he offers them his 2 daughters. Now, that's terrible in my sight, okay? As the father of a daughter, if I had 2 virgin daughters, I would go out of my way to make sure they are protected. Matter of fact, I probably would not be in the city, but I digress. Don't do this wicked thing. He offers them his 2 daughters, but then it gets worse. Okay. And I think that just goes to show, and I think this passage is pointing out to us that this is how bad the men of the city, this is how bad their sin was. Okay. This is just how wicked they had become, that even 2 virgin women were not desirable to them. Genesis 19:9, it reads, "Get out of our way," they replied. "This fellow came here as a foreigner, and now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them." They kept bringing pressure on Lot and moved forward to break down the door. Do you see how this mindset works? They were haughty and entitled, and thus could not hear the word no, and refused to be judged. They absolutely refused judgment of any kind. This also contextualizes what their intentions were to the visitors of Lot. They were not just going to have tea with them and get to know their names. No, they were so offended with Lot's judgment against them, the men of the city, that they threatened to treat Lot worse. They knew what they were going to do to the visitors was bad, but what they were going to do to Lot was going to be worse, and they told him so. They told them so. So, question, why hadn't the men of Sodom previously acted unrighteously toward Lot? Why hadn't they previously tried to have their way with Lot? Why hadn't they pushed their advances on him, right? Why didn't they pull him out of his house and have sex with him long before these visitors came along, these angels came along? I got a theory, just my theory. They may have allowed Lot a certain level of immunity from their advances. Why? Because his uncle Abraham rescued them from captivity back in Genesis 14. Now, that immunity was just about all used up. This whole live and let live policy that Lot may have had in his mind, it doesn't work in a world of people who are entitled. It doesn't work in a world of people who are haughty. Remember, you are inferior to them. Okay? They don't look at you as someone to respect. They look at you as someone to devour. They look at you as someone to satiate their desires. So I believe they gave Lot a temporary immunity, but as you can see, it's all dried up, it's all used up, and the ignition for that was Lot judging them. How dare you judge us? We see in our world today a lot of folks out there that like to tell religious folks, keep all your religious views, your beliefs, keep them in your home and in your own churches. Don't bring it out to the public square. We don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear it. Now watch this. You see a lot of groups out there, activist groups out there, that are now writing laws to come into your home. I thought we were safe in our homes, right? We can teach our kids whatever we want to in our homes. No. If your kid is questioning their gender or their sexual direction for their life, if you say no as a parent, they're writing laws right now whether the state can come into your home and take your child. Yeah. Or in your church, if you don't allow certain entitlements, if you don't allow the haughty, the group that's being represented here, to come in and be and celebrate them. If you don't celebrate them, the threats are becoming louder and louder that the state can take away your church's 501c3 tax exempt status. So now what was live and let live, what should have been live and let live, you do you, we do us, it's now breaking down our doors. It's not about you do you, we do us. Now it's about we're going to do us and we're going to do you too. Your safety is not behind your door. Your safety is in our hands. We will decide, because that's what a haughty mindset does. That's what entitlement is. This story continues on in Genesis 19 as the strangers, they pulled Lot back inside of his house, okay? And they blinded the men who were surrounding the house. Even so, their haughtiness and entitlement refused to compel them to stop and go home. I can't see anymore. This is not going to be as much fun as I thought it would be. Let me just find my way home now. No, they continue to look for the door. They continue to insist on their own hedonistic desires. Do you ever wonder why blindness was used in this situation? Lust is activated through our eyes, okay? Our society has created a multi-billion-dollar industry out of that fact of appealing to our eyes. Just look at any portion of men's adult entertainment, okay? We see something appealing, we tend to desire it, but if we don't see it, or if we can't see, if we're blind, we can no longer see, there's nothing to spark that lust. There's nothing to drive our emotions or our passions. These men of Sodom, their depravity was so ingrained in them, so ingrained within them, Not even a loss of sight could persuade them to stop. This is what it looks like when sin has taken over you. It is my right to satiate my desires. What you want means less than nothing, and no one can judge me. This is what it looks like in Romans 1, verse 21, where it says, their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. All they had left was their desires. The only way their brains would work or could work is in a way for them to achieve those desires. That's it. That was their one obsession. They have no rationale, no conscious thought for anyone else, no kind of objective view that asks the question, would I like this done to me? There's no consideration of any ramification, no fear of God or consequences, nothing. Nothing. Their minds, their ability to think became useless. Their hearts were so callous. They completely forgot what God had done for them through Abraham and his mere 318 men back in Genesis chapter 14. The two visitors told Lot, get you and your family out. This place is gone. It will be destroyed. When a place becomes this bad, there is no turning back. Oftentimes, God gave other nations an opportunity to repent before he destroyed them. Just see Nineveh in the book of Jonah. But at this point, Sodom was finished, done. No more chances, no redemption. Okay? And with no redemption possible at this point, all Sodom and Gomorrah and the other cities could do was infect or corrupt others with their wickedness. This story, sad to say, it ends with 3 survivors, Lot and his 2 daughters. That's it. Lot had 2 sons-in-law who were pledged to marry his daughters, but they thought Lot was joking when he told them to leave. We got to get out, not now, but right now. They thought he was joking. Lot's own wife turned back to look at the destruction, probably with a sense of longing. But she was turned to stone. She was turned to stone, leaving the number of survivors down to 3. Genesis 19:24 through 26. It reads, then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew those cities and the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities, and also the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Folks, this is total destruction. Complete. There's nothing left. No one left. Okay? I see this, and I think this is a sneak peek into what's going to happen in Revelation at the destruction of the world. All that will be left is the new heaven and the new earth. But everything else will be wiped, washed away in fire. This is it. This is a glimpse of what's going to happen then, but what's going to be then will be a whole lot worse than this in Genesis chapter 19. We get another take on the destruction of Sodom and the reason this destruction came upon them. We see that in Ezekiel 16:49 through 50. It reads, now this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy. They were haughty and did detestable things before me. Therefore I did away with them as you have seen. We know Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding locations. We know they were full of vegetation and food. Remember, that's why Lot chose that location to live. They were arrogant and had no concern for anyone other than their own desires in these areas. All right. They had plenty of food, plenty of stuff to give, but they didn't. They were haughty, had contempt for others as inferior. That's what haughty means. They did detestable things such as pervert the natural order of God's creation. The natural order being man and woman. We see that in Genesis 2, verse 24. They pursued instead an unnatural order. So what is an unnatural order? If Genesis 2:24 is the natural order that God set up, what is an unnatural order? Romans 1:26 through 27. It reads, "Because of this, God gave them over to shameful lust. Even their women exchanged natural sexual relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed shameful acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty of their error." When God sets the rules of nature to work a certain way, all right, it is a height of arrogance and futility to insist on working against the rules of nature. Why? God set them the way he set them for his purposes. Obviously, Sodom and Gomorrah knew better. They knew better. How do I know this? They had grown an entire city. You can't just have a city full of men without having a city full of women, right? Every one of these wicked men that surrounded the house of Lot, every single one of them had a mother and a father. So they knew how the natural order worked. Whether they agreed with it or not, they knew how it worked. However, if you're going to willfully defy the natural order set by God, what other God-made rules will you defy? Will you treat others like you want to be treated? Why? That's a God-set rule. Why would you obey that rule? Why not defy it? Will you be humble and hospitable and respectful? My question is still, why? Because God says so? The same God whose natural order that he created, that he set in place, is being not only defied, but also the defiance is celebrated each year in the month of June. What objective reason does anyone have to actually love God and to love their neighbor as themselves, as we see in Matthew 22:34 through 40? Why should we do that, objectively speaking? We as people, we will either be subject to God or we will be subject to our own passions. The men of Sodom were subject to their own passions, which led them right to their doom. There's no limit to how defiled our passions can become without God. I mentioned earlier that I have no idea how 4 kingdoms could defeat 5 kingdoms. The 4 kingdoms would be outnumbered by the 5 kingdoms. But we see in Genesis chapter 14, we see 4 kingdoms defeated 5 kingdoms. And amongst the 5 kingdoms that were defeated, that included Sodom and Gomorrah. No idea how that happened. But if I had to speculate, any nation, any city, any kingdom, any country whose men are no longer standing strong as men, but rather they're pursuing their own passions, they're pursuing their own lust, their own hedonistic desires. Any country or city whose men are no longer standing strong and defending their nation, their people, will be conquered by the invading people. Why? Because the invading people can put aside their passions long enough to conquer the nation that can't do so. Any nation, city, or country whose men have been compromised is not long for this world. I want to thank everybody for joining me today. Stay tuned for the next video.